it has been 7 years since this entire
More than 7,
conversation
yeah.
has been
Yeah.
happening, right? And ultimately, whether it's the WCC or the Hema Committee Report, at its core is about work.
Till then it was all like, oh, this cannot happen to women, blah, blah, blah. But suddenly the narrative changed. It was also DRIP manages the distribution network of the industry. There is a lot of like brotherhood happening there. And actually in Dilip's case, there is a large part of the industry's economic survival depends on him and his network. So when we met about 25 days after this incident, and of course we were a varied group, our single objective was that how do we make sure that she gets all the backing, whether it's media advocacy, whether it's government advocacy. We were like, okay, we have to call ourselves something. And so I had a friend of mine who overnight made the logo and design for WCC, and we changed our WhatsApp name, and we went into the CM's office with the letter. Like about 2-3 days later, there was some midnight oil being burnt as to how to articulate it, not to articulate it. And I think it's important when we talk about media narratives that even to date, ours is probably one of the most trolled pages. So I really didn't understand when Parvati was saying that I'm being excluded, right? And when you say excluded, of course she's had like films come up, but like understand that in the industry, a lot of our male colleagues who are at the same level as us in terms of marketability or commercial appeal do not work with us or do not choose to work with us. For me to do a Malayalam film also means that I have to work with all of these people, and all of these people will have to keep aside that baggage as well, and have to stop looking at me as somebody who represents a certain right and look at me as a character.
During that time when there was this whole thing of the AMA members saying we are a family and they are both our children, and then the women saying that they are both our children, meaning both the survivor and Dilip are both, part of this family.
We were insistent on all our social media platforms saying A.M.M.A, and they were like, don't put a dot, it affects the mother. And we were like, oh, let it affect the mother then.
Hello and welcome to the News Minute and News Laundry. I'm Nidhi Suresh. It's been a few months since the release of the Hema Committee Report. The Hema Committee Report was a first of its kind report which actually documented the systemic nature of sexual harassment, labor rights violation, and human rights violations happening within the Malayalam film industry. The entire report came about because of the efforts of the Women in Cinema Collective, the WCC, which came together and formed this collective after the 2017 actor assault case. You can read our story on this entire movement, the feminist movement in the Kerala film industry, on our website News Laundry and News Minute. It is a paywalled story. Today we have with us actor Padmapriya. She's a national award-winning actor who's worked for over 2 decades in the film industry. She's acted in languages spanning across Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada, Hindi, Bengali,
Tamil,
am I
of course.
missing? Tamil, yes, of course. I am going to refer to my notes to read out Padmapriya's credentials. She holds a master's in business administration and master's policy administration with a specialization in gender studies and PG diploma graduate in environmental law, and has a master in public administration from New York University. Did I miss anything?
No. The academic part, that's I think full and whole.
Padmapriya is also a founding member of the WCC. Firstly, thank you for coming in to speak to us today, Padmapriya.
Thanks, Nidhi.
I'm actually going to start, I want to start by asking you, when the WCC came together and, you all kind of started having conversations around forming the WCC, I remember you and I had spoken a few months ago, and we talked about how you all came together in solidarity with the survivor, only to realize that this was a much bigger issue. Can you walk me through a little bit of what was the nature of these conversations and why there was a need for WCC?
So this, the movement itself started very, very organically. So what happened literally was the incident happened with the actor assault. And then I get a call from Rima. Rima has been a friend even before we entered the industry, in the sense that we used to dance together. So we used to do contemporary dance together in Bangalore before we actually got in. So she called and said, hey, we need to do something. And I was in Delhi at that point, and I was like, of course, we should be doing something about it. And it's not like incidents like this have not happened in the past. I'm not talking about an open assault kind of a scenario like what we saw. But like, there have been many instances where especially female actors would like come up with issues and talking about them in public space, whether it be like, I can't wear this dress or I can't do this sequence, or like in my case, in when I was doing the Tamil film, I was slapped by a film director. And all of us have in many points of time, like I remember Meera Jasmine, so very popular actor back in Kerala, speaking about, when she started asserting that I will get a certain amount of pay because my films occupy a certain kind of box office space. She was literally banned from working. So like if people asked for scripts, they were considered problematic. And that's pretty much even now the case. Okay? I don't think much of that has changed. But never had been there a scenario when there was such an open onslaught of violence. And then the fact that the survivor decided to go legal with it. And then for all of us to kind of organically come together. So when she called, and then, we started saying that, okay, what are we going to do? Let's start making a date diary. Because it was something completely new.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that you kind of like spoke of all my academic credentials, and it's honestly very weird that for somebody who has even studied something like public administration in New York, and having been aware of Black Lives Matter, all those kind of movements, and having studied activism as one of her 3-credit course, it didn't strike me that activism would come so close home. In spite of the fact that I've never been a silent person when whatever little has happened to me, that I've ever been silent about it.
You even spoke up when the slapping incident happened.
Oh, absolutely. I got the director banned for 6 months. So all of that, I think there's merit to kind of seeing as to why things went in my favor then. It is strange that the same AMMA, which completely took a roundabout stand on this particular, on the actor who was assaulted.
AMMA, for our viewers, is the largest artists association in Kerala.
Yeah, it's the only. There is the largest. Yeah, there are the associations.
Yeah. We'll come to talking a little bit more about the AMMA in a bit. But
And so it was very interesting because in my case, actually, they stood up for me. All the top leaders spoke in favor of me, and it so happened that it. Having said that, I must say that the media representation of it was a controversy. It was not an issue that needed cognizance.
This is with your incident.
Yeah. And it was always like that. I remember Nazria talking about, like, I want to do this particular song sequence in this way. It was for a Tamil film, and completely like flashed all over the news, and nobody really backed, whatever little backing was, was very, 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 very sporadic. So when we actually came together, we also didn't realize as to in what kind of a structure we need to support. So we started doing few, because there was a public prosecutor. It became like a state case. So there was a public prosecutor who came in. So are we supposed to give her legal support? Are we give her, what kind of support do we give her?
And it was the first time.
It was the first time. Also because it was such a seriously physically violating act that we also didn't know, like, was it okay for us to go and speak to her, or not speak to her. And so at some point, I think 15-20 days after our formation, we said, okay, now the case is going to go to first hearing. But before like it goes into that space, what is it that we can put together so that her case is strong? Because what had happened is that a week after the incident was reported, till then, there was a very positive kind of representation for her in the media.
Yeah.
And then immediately when one of the leading actors started getting called out, there was a sudden shift in the narrative of slut shaming, victim shaming, saying that there was an affair that she was having. It was going in all directions. And we're like, okay, now this cannot be the narrative. I mean, that's standard, right? It's not like it's new where we've seen that in Hathras. We've seen that in instances across where there's a constant thing of, oh, what was she wearing? Oh, what was her relationship with the person? And so we were
to have someone within the industry, like when Dilip was accused of orchestrating this crime, even among the women who'd come together, was there, what was the, feeling? Was there, wait, let's actually take a step back? Or what was sort of like the feeling among women also who'd come together at that time?
So, no, nothing. We were, our feeling was very clear, and that whatever she thinks is justice, and whoever is involved should get incriminated in the process, right? There cannot be any leeway in that. And we were constantly only thinking about her case, and so I mean, our stand about whether it was Dilip or there was somebody else, I mean, it didn't matter even if it was not a big name.
Right.
What it mattered was that what is it that she felt was justice, that she gets it, and that's a kind of sets a precedent for other women to like feel comfortable speaking about it. But that was a very I think even the second part of it really didn't come into the picture. All we wanted at that point of time was justice for the actor who had been assaulted. But I think 15-20 days after this incident and the narrative started shifting, and then all of these new pieces of jigsaw puzzle just coming together, we were like, there has to be no way that her case gets undermined. And so we actually physically met for the first time about 20-25 days after the incident happened, and we met in Kochi, and there were about 18-20 of us, maybe less than that, 15 of us, coming from all parts of the country.
And was it all actors or?
No. So WCC is a group of, as we call ourselves, it's a cinema collective, and so there's not a particular trade. For viewers who don't, know that the cinema industry at least has about 40 crafts, and it's constantly changing with technology and with time. So, everything from animators to people who hold light, to all of these, like to the makeup artist to hairstylist, all of them composed to be part of cinema. And each of these trades and crafts have their own idiosyncrasies in the way how they get into filmmaking process. And also, therefore, how they are engaged and how they are dealt with, right? In terms of how you get the gig, and because it's a gig economy, it's just a gig economy, right?
Yeah.
That's how it survives. So I think when we met about 25 days later, and we were like, okay, before this case goes into hearing, we have to make sure she gets a good public prosecutor. Let's go meet the CM. And so we came down actually to, okay, because we've been on WhatsApp and we've been across the space, and we've never ever come together. We all knew each other, and we were everybody from singers to, like as I said, the composition was pretty varied. So when we met about 25 days after this incident, and of course we were a varied group, our single objective was that how do we make sure that she gets all the backing, whether it's media advocacy, whether it's government advocacy, so that there is absolutely no compromise on the way justice is approached for her, because we've all seen how justice really does not work in the favor of survivors most of the times, right? And also how to speed roll it in terms of the time it takes.
Was she ever part of the conversations or not?
Not really.
Not really.
And we were very cognizant about that, because as we started consulting lawyers, they said that if you show too much engagement, then it will influence the case. And so you have to provide support which is only catalytic in nature. It cannot be something which seems is interfering with the case, because one of the members who was there, then a very active part of the organization at that point, was also a witness. Actually, 2-3 of them were also witness to the case. And so we were very clear that, and at that time we had still not called Women in Cinema Collective or anything. We were just a group of women. So we started getting cognizant that we can't, we also have very strong public personas and images, whether they're filmmakers or actors. We had pretty high profile known female actors who were there, known female directors who were there. And so when we met, we were like, okay, we have these 2 things. And then what do? We had a whole day to spend, and we started having tea and a lot of snacks, which was brought in by a very close member of us who loves eating. And so we just we were just chatting. And there are 2 things which happened that day, Nidhi. And one was the fact that we started speaking about our experiences and therefore our fears, and started acknowledging each other's, even if they were varied. And I think if you read the JHC report, I mean, what the JHC found 5 years after our formation,
The
is what
is
is the Justice Hema Committee Report. Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing in the required clarity there. But so something happened at that moment. It was like a, I still get my goosebumps, and I think that's when WCC got formed. It was not like a very conscious decision. So as I said, two things happened. And then slowly we started allaying our fears, which brought in a certain kind of sisterhood, a certain kind of conversation which suddenly became very different than what happened in the actor assault case. Somehow we found that lever which explains why the industry behaves in this way towards us. We started acknowledging that societal patriarchy, all of this, like the things which do not get articulated, got articulated for all of us. And for me, that was a moment of nemesis, because as a person who had studied so much, who came from a very privileged background in the sense that my parents were very liberal. The way I was brought up was exactly how my brother was brought up. We had equal amount of like our hours when it came to coming home, etc. Curfew times, exactly same. They were never different. And the fact that I came into the industry not having any starry-eyed dreams, and so I made my choices, and choices came to me. It's not like I ran behind film offers or opportunities. They came to me. And I'm not saying this from a space of arrogance. I'm coming from a space of the fact that I had that ability to make the choice, which most women don't.
Yeah.
And I couldn't articulate what happened to me, why I exited from the industry, as something which was a function of, the power structure, the patriarchal space of the place, and not to do with me personally. I had somehow always attributed it to me. And that's, I think, the second thing which happened. And which was to say that we've been constantly in this culture of, amidst so many of these naysayers, which are mostly men, that we had somewhere lost ourselves. And just because we loved the craft, we went along. And I'm talking about women not just of, my age group. There were women who were younger than me. There were women much older to me. And all of us felt like suddenly very, very weak and equally empowered. There was this sudden thing of like finding a sense of power, I wouldn't say not to stay silent, but power to assert ourselves regardless of the repercussions. We did not know what repercussions are going to come. And that's when we started saying, what are our solutions? Like, it just happened in those couple of hours. It's unbelievable. That letter, which was just stuck with 2 bullet points for the actor who was assaulted.
This is the letter that went to the Chief Minister.
Chief Minister, yeah. That we were going to go to the CM and we were part of this government advocacy basically for the actor. And those 2 bullet points became like these huge wish list, of which one of them was to have the Justice Hema Committee Report, and one was, asking for funding for just female filmmakers.
Right.
And with some kind of, we were like, okay, we have to call ourselves something. And so I had a friend of mine who overnight made the logo and design for WCC, and we changed our WhatsApp name, and we went into the CM's office with the letter. Like about 2-3 days later, there was some midnight oil being burnt as to how to articulate it, not to articulate it, because all of us came from very different, diverse, but very important perspectives. We have a feminist teacher, lecturer, come script writer. So we have all kinds of women, right? Like in that space. And so all of them brought their wealth of experience and information. And when we went to meet the CM, we did not know that this was going to become such a media event. That photograph was, like, I wasn't there that day, but we never knew that photograph is going to become something which completely changes the narrative, both for the survivor and for all of us. And the narrative in many good ways and not so many good ways, right?
I actually want to come to this media narrative because for our viewers, this entire movement and the formation of the WCC, meeting the CM, all of this was happening a good 6 to 7 months before the global Me Too movement, the Weinstein movement that happened. And I remember...
So it was the first of its kind in cinema.
In cinema, yeah. And I remember when, you and I spoke a few months ago, similarly, you mentioned how there was no language. to report this. And eventually it was when the Me Too movement sort of happened that there was some kind of, understanding of how do we do this.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the newsroom, I remember that I was in the newsroom at that point. And even when Me Too happened, there was such a sense of not knowing. There was no precedent on how to even do this as reporters. But can you tell me a little bit about what was the difference in the language of reporting before and after Me Too in Kerala?
I think I think for Kerala it was doing very distinctively before 2007, after 2017. It's literally that, right? Because and one of the most important language changes has been, I mean, I can bet it. Like when the scenario happened, we were like vociferously fighting, saying that you cannot call her a victim, you can't call victim, you have to call survivor. We were literally like, like we were like these bunch of fierce women who were like, we will not take this lying down. You cannot speak about this like a controversy. So I think the two important words which changed was victim to survivor, controversy to issue. Right? And I think over a period of time, a certain amount of empathy in the reporting process. Empathy was a far more like nuanced thing. But these first two things were, I think, like these two words kind of changed also the narrative for the survivor in terms of how this was viewed, especially after Dilip was jailed for the 3 months. And then suddenly people were like, and there was like, also like, I must appreciate that there was a lot of public furor and anger, almost very similar for audiences, across the board to understand. I think the Nirbhaya case and even the RG case now, kind of, there are certain things which kind of stir the like larger populace, and that's what happened. And at some point when I think Dilip was getting arrested, and about that time is when the photograph with the CM happened. There was actually, Dilip owned these restaurants called They Put to, and there was like breaking of that restaurant by people, like they were like pelting stones. And these are regular human beings. They're not like, they're not politicians. This was not like a political movement at all in that sense, for a state which is very politically very active, right?
Do you think that anger was more an anger towards how unsafe women were feeling, or was it being let down by an actor like Dilip?
I think both. And also the fact that there was a sudden change in the moral compass, because I think Malayalam cinema generally, let's look at it, right? Like they generally produce actors and films which are of a certain standing creatively and intellectually, right? I think we've all now, because thanks to the OTT movement, we don't have to assert and explain it too much. And so the kind of female actors also would come in, but like at least like basic education to sab log kar hi lete the. Like, nobody would like come, I have left my education in 9th grade and come here. No. Because that's a kind of social security net that Kerala has, and mostly, barring me, I'm an exception, mostly female actors also are Malayali women. So what happened was the first time when educated, smart women who have a public standing and who are relevant in today's times were coming out and calling spade a spade. And then the incident, of course, and then the survivor standing for it. And then this popular actor, suddenly this completely changing into becoming a very different thing than what it seemed to be. All of them, I think all these factors put together with, I'm sure there's also like a deep-seating anger in the society, both amongst across all genders, about violation and where it comes from. That I think it was just one of those volcanic movements. And we did not like leave a centimeter of space for, and all the it was not just Dilip, it was like everything was happening out in the open. So for instance, the AMMA, the Actors Association, we had 3 or 4 of our members on the executive committee at that point of time. No, 2 of our members. So 2 of our members, one was an actor-director, Geetu, there was Ramya, Nambishan, and then there was the survivor, who was a member. She was not an executive committee member. And suddenly this executive committee, headed by then, by, I think, Innocent, as the president, who's no more. And all of them meet in Mammootty's place. And, there is this sudden thing of what kind of posturing we should do, because till now people were not used to the idea of standing for a female. Right? Because the minute Dilip got involved in the case, they did not know how to respond to it. Till then, they were like...
Because he was at that point the treasurer.
He was also at the point of treasurer. And also till then, it was all like, oh, this cannot happen to women, blah, blah, blah. But suddenly the narrative changed. It was also Dilip manages the distribution network of the industry. There is a lot of like brotherhood happening there. And actually in Dilip's case, there is a large part of the industry's economic survival depends on him and his network. And so suddenly there was this shift in stand, and you did not know what to do, and we were like saying, our members were saying, you were like, you have to like at the least suspend him, and they refused to do so. So at that point, the survivor resigned, and along with her, both these executive committee members and Rima resigned. And then myself, Revati and Parvati Tiruvuthu were like, what do we do now? Like, because even within WCC, there's a lot of democracy. And we were like, we're not going to like quit, because if all of us quit, they're just going to do what they are going to do. So then we went ahead. So there was a lot of this. The thing is, all their public media statements were so antithetical or anti the public sentiment that it went completely against them. So what they would have otherwise gotten away with, saying, अच्छा ये controversy है जो हो रहा है और वो scandal है, वो फिर कुछ और कोई कर लेगा. It didn't stop there. People said that no, we can't, like this shit is not lying down. And I think all of that, all of the wrong kind of words and positioning that they were taking was also like kind of something which the public was not excusing.
I think there was a very specific moment in during that time when there was this whole thing of the AMA members saying we are a family and they are both our children, and then the women saying that they are both our children, meaning both the survivor and Dilip are both part of this family. And there was a big conversation around how the articulation of that was a problem.
Right? And I think our big fight, actually one of the few of the members was, even Mukesh, who's been now called out, and me too, who's also vice president then, was that we were insistent on all our social media platforms saying A.M.M.A. And they were like, don't put a dot, it affects the mother. And we were like, oh, let it affect the mother then. Like, it was, Amma is mother. And I mean, there is a certain language which we can't like translate exactly in English right now. But we literally came down to that. We were like, it came down to semantics like that. So when, and that is something, again, that's another thing which the media caught on to, because there were some who were like saying Amma. There's some, now to there's a clarity on who says AMMA versus who says Amma, right, within the media, to know where who leans when. And then we went off to AMMA. So there were a lot of incidents which happened, and we said, like, you have to, like, our 2-3 demands are very clear that, you bring in the survivor because the survivor resigned because of you. We said you remove and suspend the person because that's what POSH says, that's what the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act says. And we said that systematically bring in POSH and IC inside Amma, because as such we're an organic industry, and you are the guys who decide how our contracts should look at, so then as well look at safety and security for women. And they refused to acknowledge all of that. And I think that's when the second media conference happened. And I think that was an important media narrative shift, because a lot of them thought that we are just going to come here in this media conference and, speak and do a Me Too on particular male actor. But all we came down is spoke out to our credentials, and we said that this is what AMMA is not doing, and therefore we'll go to the High Court asking for them to intervene and implement POSH. But interestingly, what happened in that media event, which was our first physical press conference, I must let you know that WCC mostly only works through social media handles. And I think it's important when we talk about media narratives that even to date, ours is probably one of the most trolled pages. And when we talk about the Justice Hema Committee Report, and you talk about what happened post that in terms of media narrative, is that it's the first time, including AMMA members, said thank you to WCC. And for the first time, when the JHC report came out, our pages were never trolled. That there was like so much strength and following and so many emails. So like there's this entire e-narrative to it, right? Like which is the non-mainstream but now the mainstream media, but it's like the online media. We've always been trolled. Like we've always been called elitist. We've been called all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
But I think that particular media conference was very important. It was the first time that we were doing a physical media conference. Till then, everything is a Facebook post. And we kind of stick to that even to date, whatever announcements we make. And it was such a terrifying experience because all of us were standing. This was our second post the CM event, was the most photo-opt moment. And I think when the JHC report came out, this was kind of put out. And I think it's important because it was flooded by male members, which is not problematic by itself. What was problematic about it was they were extremely violent in their language and our questioning.
The media personnel.
The media. Because it was a PC, it was a press conference. And they constantly looked down upon us, again shamed us as as women. And it was super empowering that way to have the network of, NWMI, the network of
women in media and
women
in media and journalism,
who came together and stood very strongly in support, because even I think some of those reporters were not allowed to come into the PC, and it became like that was another point in nemesis in terms of saying that female journalists, I think, became very active in reporting. They said, this is very much our space to report. And I remember after that media conference, the number of female reporters reporting on both the survivors case and all of WCC's stands and conversations that they have been part of really radically increased.
And there was a difference in how men and women were reporting it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think also they started, like other survivor cases started coming out, right? And they all started going legal, and some of them took WCC support, some of them took WCC support even when they chose not to go legal. Like one of the cases, also the nuance of conversations changed. And that's really sad in a way that that's not kind of gotten translated across the board in the rest of the film industries. Because unfortunately in the rest of the film industries, even after the Hema Committee report has come out, the focus is more on the sexual assault, but nobody is really looking at, or the sexual violations, nobody's looking as to why the sexual violations happen. And and that comes from a position of power. And that position of power is not just restricted to a few people, like we saw when the lips thing happened and the narrative moved, but also, at all echelons of the hierarchy. In cinema, the hierarchy is not just at the top where the director and the actor, but it moves down up till the production manager, line manager. It really goes down. It's like, it's multi-layered. And depending on whom they are governing, or who comes within their jurisdiction of power, gets affected.
Right.
And therefore, so what happened was that in terms of the media narrative for us, started shifting when other kinds of survivors brought in other kinds of issues. For instance, one survivor said that for a very famous director's son, in his film, this female actor refused to use a body double and said, I don't want this scene to be shot this way. This is not what we had agreed to. And so they kind of shot it and they left her. And then in the cinema hall, she saw the same scene with a body double. Suddenly conversations started shifting about what kind of violations. So I think the time from, like, it's been 7.5 years since the HC report came out, right? So in the 7.5 years, the nature of conversation on violations of gender rights has also shifted slowly and steadily. As many people would have thought that, what is WCC doing now? 1 or 2 years of silence. But no, it was never silence, because there was something or the other constantly churning. So when the HC report came out, it was a huge blow, not just because it spurred an entire Me Too, which none of us has anticipated, but also because the idea on conversation on rights, and as they say, right, like they say that when you talking about feminist rights, you're talking about equality for all. And I think we've reached that nemesis where we've reached that point in Malayalam film industry, at least, and because I sit on the film policy board, we've realized that conversation no more is about rights for women. It's rights, of course, for the vulnerable, but which has to be like, like brought up to speed, like in a big way, in both in terms of inclusion and safety and justice. But more so, it is for everybody. So people started realizing that when you are talking about toilets, you're not just talking about toilets for women. If you have toilets in a workspace, you're talking about toilets like many old actors work. The script doesn't differentiate between a male and a female actor, right? An old person who needs to go and visit a bathroom, most people, and when I'm talking about actors, please don't like immediately think of the main cast, right? There are supporting cast, there are casts who are like, now there's a conversation on don't call me a junior actor, call me an actor, call me a supporting actor. I mean, that's a conversation which has started happening in Kerala, where they're talking about dignity in also how you're called. Like I think the conversation around when, especially with the queer community, as to how they liked to be called and represented, whether they like to be called queer or not. I think that's the nature of conversations which is happening as we sit here and talk. They're very clear, and they're suddenly spreading news. And like, because you said AMA is one of the biggest actors associations, so for everybody, the viewers, there are multiple actors associations, especially for supporting actors. And when I say supporting actors in the language that Malayalis or the Malayalam film industry would like it, but these are the extras and junior actors, or what we call them juniors. Yeah, they just come for a scene and will be there like as a prop somewhere, just like probably this black wall sometimes, right? Or just there like as part of the environment. And I think I think that is the nature of conversation that shifted after the Hema Committee Report happened. And for a long time, when we were talking about this in this space, when we were seeking that, we are talking about gender rights, but we're also talking about rights for all. We had made in WCC, apart from this, we had done like a full-length research report across all the 4 Southern Indian industries and across varied trades. And when we went to the government for advocacy around it, it did not just talk about gender rights. Gender was an important thing because we are one of the most vulnerable and one of the least represented but most present in the industry. Like it's like politics, right? 50% of your vote bank is women, but you don't want female representation. We're still arguing about it and how even the present polity has kind of subverted the conversation of female representation.
Yeah, but that's actually a very interesting way to put it. The least represented, but also
the most present.
The most present.
Right?
Yeah. But, take me back to the day when the report came out. Where were you? Where were you when the Hema Committee report came out? Were you sort of anticipating it coming out that day? Who told you? Did you see it on the news? Were you surprised?
So where was I at that time? So it's very interesting that I must tell you that a lot of people talk about how we have lost work opportunities because we are part of the Women in Cinema Collective. But a lot of us have gone through many sessions of, one is because when you lose work, you also lose a lot of, in an industry which is all about being visible at the workplace and therefore in the media space. It also affects your, your belief and faith in your craft. And it also takes away, because we were dealing with a lot of survivors who are coming and reporting to us. And all of us are voluntary members. We don't take funding from anywhere. We don't take membership money. We don't do anything of that sort. All of us are trying to work, earn a livelihood and do this, which is a lot of work. Honestly, at least out of the 17 hours that I work, at least 2 hours or 1 hour, on an average in a week, I have technically you should have a 40-hour week.
Yeah.
I have a 60-hour week. And in that 60 hours, I at least spend 15-20 hours on WCC. And it's a non-remunerative, thankless, forget about non-remunerative, it takes away whatever little compensation that I can get from this industry, right? It's also the mental, the psychological and mental, emotional journey that for all of us is that it's when we talk to survivors and we have to handhold them, it's not something we are trained to do.
Yeah.
None of us are. And each one of us has to choose to become mentors for them, and then we shift hands, even with the survivor whose verdict is going to come out now, others parting of the survivors, to be constantly there, be backing for her. has always meant that we have taken each other for granted because we assume that we are supposed to be the strong ones. But the fact is, that's not the case. Like, it's taken a huge toll. And so every time I would like kind of take a health break, something radical would happen. So that's where I was. So the first time I took a health break because I was having major immobility issues because of stress. Completely emotional stress. I had gone to like an Ayurvedic center, which my parents always go to. And that's when the AMMA press meet was to happen and the AMMA conversation was supposed to happen, where me and Parvati and Revati were supposed to go and ask them to bring the survivor back and implement POSH. And so I remember those 15 days I had gone for treatment there. My mother was with me. And she was annoyed because they switch off lights at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And I would be like talking at the top of my voice with my laptop on till 9 p.m. It was like a waste.
This was in 2018.
Yeah. And after that, was now, because by then, like, I had like huge inflammation, like major disorders, right? I couldn't even move. Like, I mean, I've had like major immobility thanks to all the stress which has accompanied this process. I mean, it's not just this, but like a large part of it I'd attributed to the movement. But I was in this naturopathy center, and this was like 3 weeks into it, and I was like, I had like gone for an entire 7 weeks, and the director is known. I mean, I've always been a naturopath since my early 20s, and I was there for my 3rd week, and then this JHC report has been lying in the dumps for like 3 years.
Last 5 years.
5 years, right? I mean, it's become a dated report now in a way. And suddenly they're like, the report is coming out. I'm like, no, this can't happen now. Like, this is like my 3rd week and I was like, 15 days of water fast, and I'm like really in this super curative meditative space, and I'm like, no, this cannot happen. I'm like ignoring it. And then fortunately, because it's a very closed space and they don't even allow you to go out of the campus and things like that. And so the director of the institute said, you're not like taking any calls, you're not like seeing your mobile phone, you're not doing any of that. And I was like, how is that possible? Because we've been waiting for the last 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly the film policy committee meetings start becoming active. Like 2 weeks, like a week before this report is coming out. I don't know if it was...
Did you wish you were not on a health break?
No. I was very happy I was on a health break. I had no anticipation that JHC is going to
This was going to happen, yeah.
Right. And I was just like saying, can you just hold on for 3-4 weeks more? Because I just want to like cure myself so that I can be equipped enough to deal with this.
Yeah.
Because we know that when something like this comes out, and for a long time, I mean, for the viewers, the report did come out in parts, like the recommendations came out. And we were like,
there was a one-pager that came out, right? Yeah.
And we were like, this one-pager will be released in 2017. We don't want to know. We want to know what is it that led you to lead these findings, right? Or like these solutions, right? Because the findings were extremely important for us to validate to the rest of the public that this is not our imagination. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And so when it came out, for me, it was like a shocker, like, oh my God, now there was like left, right and center calls from media, of course, like pouring in. But I decided that I'm going to like stay away, right? And I said to the rest of and the second thing to my advantage was that there were very limited signals. There were actually very limited signals. So one had to like really go out somewhere to take a call. And because it was raining a lot, so there was like logistical issue also.
Yeah.
And I was just not in that space because I decided this is a time where I really needed to, take care of myself, because if I didn't take care of myself, then whatever I wanted to do couldn't happen.
Yeah. But you came out then and wrote an Indian Express
article which happened a good 3 weeks after when it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, but it's a very, very, very important article about like what actually was happening and the responses around it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But it took me a lot of time. But I also wanted to take that time to write that piece. And I think I must thank the Express for, like, especially Pooja, who had commissioned that. I said, listen, I don't want to be in a rush. I need to read the report.
Yeah, and 290 pages.
Yeah, one is reading the 290 pages, which almost instantly, So that was a beautiful thing which happened during the JHC report. I remember I would like get called from journalists, and I have huge respect for people like Kamlesh, who, heads, one of the leading people at Asianet. And this would never be the case when I entered the film industry, or even at the peak of my, career. Like if you said that, listen, I need time. People would be like, no, you need to respond now. And I was like, no, I cannot respond now. And I'm in a space where I'm not emotionally situated well. And secondly, I do not have the logistics support that I'm going to do anything under the sun to ensure that there's internet bandwidth for me to come on call.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be part, and I also said very clearly that I don't want to be part of panel conversations where everybody is screaming on top of each other without actually diagnosing and understanding. And for you to expect me that in 24 hours to read a 270-page report, which is difficult to read by itself because of the nature of its contents, to digest it, then to emotionally and intellectually be able to articulate what it is trying to say, no. And then most of the times, when I individually represent a view, that's not necessarily the collective's view.
Yeah.
And the fact that you always consider that whatever I'm saying is a collective's view is also, perceptibly wrong.
Yeah.
Because even to date, WCC hasn't actually come out with we're still working on that piece, right?
Yeah.
Where we have not come out with a cohesive standing. And that's brilliant in one way, because all kinds of narratives outside of WCC are now weaving a conversation on the JHC report.
But there has been a question of where the WCC really stands on the entire issue and going forward. Especially some of the conversations was that there were press conferences before, when the WCC was getting formed. So why was there not one after the Hema Committee report was released? That's been one of the questions. And also, in what ways is now WCC offering support to women?
Yeah.
These have been questions that have come up. So, as a representative of the organization now,
I speak about for the collective now, right? I think we've been way too busy since the HC report came out. So even though I was not putting myself out in the media, which was a very purposive thing, because you want to engage with the issue, not necessarily always respond to it. And we also wanted other people to respond. We're like, hello, this is not just about women. Yes, it's a report which talks about the status quo of women, but clearly it's just not that. And it's been evident in the conversations, at least in Kerala. I know that kind of nuanced conversation has not happened apart from the first 2 weeks of roar which happened in the national media, all because of the sexual harassment part, and which is, I think, extremely important to address, right? But that's not, I think one needs to understand the symptomatic issues which affect sexual harassment while addressing what has happened in terms of justice. And so it took us a lot of time to kind of cohesively look at the JHC report. It was also 4.5 years after that it's coming. And so in a way, it's also dated. When I say dated, it's because there have been many actors who've lost lives, who are not there right now. The survivor's case has taken a different journey. The survivor now is an actor. I think the social dynamics in Kerala about seeing gender issues is little different, at least amongst the public and the media. And for us, it's not just that report. There was the Nadu report.
Yeah.
There was the JHC report. There was the Saki report, which was done by WCC. As I speak about this, it should be of significance that in the UK they are making a code of conduct for creative industries as a whole, of which cinema is an important part. And when we started studying all of this, we realized that what's happening in Kerala may be unique to India, but it's not unique to the world. Across the country, whether it's Australia, France, Japan, the UK, the US, wherever Me Too surfaced, there have been very strong movements, very similar to WCC in one way or the other, either within the government, in different forms and formats, and have exactly followed this kind of a routine where there is a commission, there's a report, the report leads to a furor, and they don't know where to go, and there has to be a bringing in of a law. There's all kinds of issues coming in, and then there's some kind of a solution finding, which is still happening.
Right.
And so we started learning from there. And for us, to come out with a position and standing, it was very important that we'd been talking about sexual harassment, we'd been supporting survivors. And for us, we were very clear that the JHC report was about solutions as much as about findings. And we needed to understand the findings better to come up with solutions, right? And now that we understood what the findings were, and for some reason, I think there is this narrative that, oh, WCC constructed the JHC, which is not true. I think there were about 55, 60 respondents. Our entire membership is about 30, 35. Of which only probably 50% went in. So clearly, and there are a lot of male representatives and male voices also in the report, including the ex-president of AMMA who is gone and, gone and spoken to the Justice Hema team. So for us, we were very clear that we're not going to see the JHC report stand alone as an individual being thing, but to respond to it as a cohesive idea. In the presence of a larger movement which is happening internationally with respect to gender rights, especially in cinema, and also specifically with respect to the kind of research which has happened in the Malayalam film industry, thanks to all of WCC's efforts and outside of WCC efforts. And in the context of all that which is happening culturally and socially within Kerala. So we decided to take a step back and say, okay, how are we going to come in as a collective? And there were 2-3 different ways. One is, of course, I'm part of the Film Policy Committee, but also we had been constantly advocating with kind of lots of papers and policy solutions for the government. And so we were working on a far more cohesive policy kind of a support that one can see, especially from a gendered lens. The High Court came up with a very interesting order where they said that the government now should make, the SIT and the government has to start putting in a female gaze and a feminist approach. But honestly, how many people, even within Kerala, in spite of the WCC movement, understand what's a feminist approach to film, like a film policy? Out of the 35 states which have come out with a film policy, none of them have a gender element in it. And when you say a gender element, it's not just focused on कि कितना fund दे दिया gender के लिए. But like internationally, there are enough examples. Like for instance, Swiss decided at some point of time that at least 50% of their women are going to be female filmmakers. They didn't come out with just dole out grants. They come out with a full plan in a decade, managed to achieve it. From their film festivals to everything. And today, it's very interesting when the IFFK just finished, it had a massive female representation. It's interesting.
Is the film festival in Kerala.
The film festival in Kerala. And nobody's talking about WCC's, contribution in bringing that, because we've been constantly talking about representation as well. So from a very purely policy and from a solution standpoint, we have been also like doing different things. One is, of course, making an entire pitch of like about 40 solutions which the government can implement to kind of both bring a gender nuance to it, but also a very equal, healthy workspace, including the cinema code of conduct, right?
This is the policy committee.
This is the policy part of it. The second element too is that while a lot of the biggies who have also been, named and shamed after the Hema Committee report whenever they have made statements, because they're very, very just, said for the heck of it instead of having any weight, especially our male colleagues. We also realized that there were a lot of male colleagues, especially because the report spoke about a lot of human rights violations, which cuts across gender. Right? Like, for instance, lack of contracts, lack of basic facilities, like most of the post-production, which includes editing, which includes sound, which includes animation, your poster making. The studios that they work in do not have an ecosystem. They don't even have bathrooms, and most of them are occupied by men, and they have 18-hour shifts. So they're talking about health issues. So suddenly the conversation, if you notice, has moved beyond just like, that's also problematic in the sense that you cannot invisibilize the gender aspect of it, or even for that matter, now suddenly the inclusion of trans, LGBTQIA rights. So if you provide toilets for women and men, what happens to, trans? So there's a totally different kind of a narrative and conversation when it comes to policy making that's happening in Kerala. I really wish this kind of thing came out in the larger space, because I feel like all the film industries will benefit from it. So one is that, but second, more importantly, apart from the biggies, we noticed that there are a lot of people, because of this change in narrative, because they suddenly see that, oh, you know, there was I remember like FEFCA, which used to say, oh, we cannot take care of, you know, I remember when we filed a Hema, you know, in the High Court.
This is the Exhibitors Association.
No, FEFCA is
Film Employees.
Film Employees Federation.
Yeah, it's the umbrella
body
organization.
For all the technical teams, not the
Yeah.
producers. So just for the audience to know that the film industry across the country basically is a set of associations, which is clubs technically, but wield a lot of power because they determine how the industry works.
Right.
And most of them have like a producers association, which is a set of producers. Then you have actors association, and this is cutting across regional industries, Bollywood, everywhere. And then you have something called like a, you know, screenwriters association in Bombay, but like in Kerala we have an umbrella body, 2 umbrella bodies. So you can have as many such umbrella bodies, right? Because they are after all societies. And this one is one of the biggest representations of directors, editors, all kinds of technical craft, makeup and hair union. Suddenly you started having, you know, squabbles within the makeup artists union, which is both men and women, saying that shit is happening to us. The Hema Committee Report is saying that, you know, this is an unequal space. People are talking about dignity at workplace, which is to say that they're treated like slaves, that they get food. Some people get food in a plastic plate and some people get cold food, which is like kept for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then like stale cold food given to them, that they hardly get 2 through 3 hours of sleep at workplace. And this is not just during shooting, but also in post-production and pre-production.
Yeah.
So this entire thing has kind of one other thing that we have been doing is canvassing amongst like-minded people who are seeing especially rights of workers, right? And they're like, you know, I remember in like some of the conversations they say that, you know, like the people who employ, if they are the ones who are heading a workers' union, how are they ever going to take care of workers' interests?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of radical conversation has never happened.
Yeah.
And nobody thought that that would be repercussion of the HC report, which is why when they say the Malayalam film industry is going through crazy times, it's not just because that a few people are going on behind the jail, but because they are like, everybody is like, hey, we need to change how we work.
Yeah. But I want to ask you, you know,
no, but I just want to complete the thought on the WCC part, because the collective's view will come out, I think, you know, on the JHC report alone will come out more cohesively, because we are trying to like do a far more strategic communication of our understanding of the report. But most of it, one was of course, the, you know, the recommendations that we have made, 40 recommendations, 40 odd, always growing recommendations, apart from the Cinema Code of Conduct. But the second thing was to actually canvass like-minded people to come together and start making their voices visible within the workspaces, so that there is a larger articulation of rights, right? And the third most important thing, which would be about, you know, the sexual harassment aspect of it, and WCC stand has been very clear that with the establishment of the SIT, and we had gone many times over this, that we went to the CM also and represented the Chief Minister of Kerala to like tell him that the SIT is a great first move.
Yeah, for our viewers, the SIT is a special investigation team comprising of Kerala Police, where they are now getting women to file FIRs and sort of kind of take cognizance of what has come out in the report.
Yeah.
And that's gone a bit both ways, where there have been women who are being sort of coerced into filing FIRs.
Yeah. So because you see, actually the SIT was first set up for the many Me Too cases that were happening, because it was happening so many in such little time.
Yeah, after the report
and
came
all
out.
the biggies were named.
Yeah.
That it became imperative for the SIT to be formed. But then the High Court of Kerala at some point stepped in and said, why only that? I think a non-redacted version of it should be supplied to the SIT.
Yeah.
So even if the names are hidden, at least the people who have complained, because these are cognizable offences, many of them, that those need to be investigated and seen what way it can lead to. And I think WCC stand on this has been fairly, very, very articulate and clear. And I think we've made that out very publicly in our posts and media descriptions, saying that primarily women who feel that they should go the legal route that survivor's case. She has been a WCC member at some point, and I know about her case in 2018 when she came out in public at that point of time itself. And it's interesting, at that point nobody took it up, right? And she was pretty vocal about it even then. And this is a Siddiq case.
Yeah.
And I remember in this survivor's case, she always wanted legal recourse. And there's another member of ours who did not want to have a legal recourse, and all she wanted was a public apology from the person who harassed her. Now let's understand that all the violations which happen border from everything from verbal abuse to sexual harassment of varied degrees.
Yeah.
And because there has been, let's also understand that violation of rights and violation of the law is the standard practice in film industry, not just in Malayalam, across. It has become so much a status quo and cultural, apart from paying income tax and GST, everything that the industry does is actually very illegal. It's actually not very, it's illegal. What do you mean by very illegal? It's illegal. So it doesn't implement the IC. The POSH Act is one thing. It doesn't implement, like for instance, now that we have started studying Factories Act and all of these acts, there are many acts, umbrella of acts, which actually protect even unorganized industries. And it's never been spoken about. And I think that's why I think the JHC report has also gained significance in Kerala, because suddenly a lot of unorganized spaces are like saying that, oh, these could apply to us. And so this actually stands a great, like whatever happens in terms of policy and lawmaking because of this report, now will actually have repercussions across other sectors, especially other unorganized sectors which say, oh, there is no workplace which has more than 10 people. Like for instance, there is a factories, what is it? I think it's a Factories Act, and I can come back to it. Maybe we can have like a explanation somewhere in your description, where it clearly talks about the owner's responsibility of safe transportation to be the responsibility of the owner. I think Shopkeepers Act or something like that. And so you cannot eliminate women from working post 8 p.m. in a shop because of the fact that she's a woman and she needs safe transportation.
Right.
And this is all in a way connected to our fundamental rights of inclusion, right? That employability has to be nothing to do with gender. It's not the female's mistake that you have an unsafe place. It's the responsibility of the government, the police enforcement, and the society in general to ensure safety. And you cannot exclude a woman from a workplace because you can't have a safe space. And therefore, if you can't have a safe space, if that's a longer objective, then the onus on the owner or the employer is to ensure that there is safety while transporting. And so we are like looking at all of that, but then does that lead to disincentivizing including women? How do you track that? So we're looking at what kind of metrics, what kind of laws. So there is an entire, I think the Industrial Disputes Act, I'm not sure which one. There are like at least about 10 different acts that when we spoke to a recent, a lawyer recently, and I think this calls for a separate conversation on what all kind of acts are involved.
But this is all part of the 40 recommendations.
This is all part of, this is part of the 40 recommendations plus, because we're also like trying to, so this is more on so what we're doing with the High Court right now, apart from, so there's a lot of legal activism also WCC has been doing from the beginning, from implementation of the POSH and necessitating the implementation of the POSH and saying the producer is responsible. And what that led to is, it's a formation of some kind of a, committee led by the Women's Commission. But which has got nothing to do with the JHC report, but post the JHC report has been a lot of conversation. So again, I think there's been so much of interplaying things, like moving things, right? So as far as the survivors is concerned, I hope I've made the stand clear that it's very categorical that those who want to take legal recourse should take legal recourse. Those who do not should not be coerced. And we have made CM representations. There has also been an interesting activity which has happened in the High Court where we have pleaded in to a case, which is basically the High Court is now taking a proactive stand, not on one is on the SIT, which is kind of dealing with cases also, but to seeing what kind of a legal template can be set for the film industry so that there are no more violations like what is being reported in the JHC. So in both of these cases, WCC is pleaded into them. And in the sexual harassment, we have been very consistently saying that the SIT should do its job as long as it's not coercing people. And so therefore, our lawyers have, and this has happened just recently, like a month back, where within the SIT, a nodal officer has been appointed, and that nodal officer is responsible to make sure that if you're a survivor who's being coerced, the survivor can go to the nodal officer and complain to them that you are coercing me and you have no right to coerce me.
Interesting.
Not only that, we have
this
now...
has been, it's just been a month.
It's just been a month.
Okay.
It actually happened on December 15th before it went into holidays. And we're going to do an advocacy campaign around this now, because a lot of people are not aware of this nodal officer. But the scope of that has also been expanded, you know, in the second hearing of this nodal officer thing, where we said that now you need not only go to the cases which have been registered in HC or the Me Too which happened right out of the HC report, but if there are survivors who want to go and speak to the nodal officer about cases, they can still can. So it is, you know, because you don't have an IC in implementation, like, you know, or like you don't know how to implement an IC as
now
yet.
You have one person.
Now you have this nodal officer where you can at least go suo moto and like say that I want to take a legal recourse on my case. And the great thing about the SIT is that I think what it will help survivors do is that it keep their confidentiality. Like, you know, it kind of give an immediate legal framework, which if you went to a police officer or a police station, that kind of an empathy and that kind of solution making wouldn't be easily available. And I think the HC has given time up till February or March till when this nodal officer in this space will be open. Because it has to be time bound. So this is the kind of work which WCC has done for survivors, which has not been spoken about. And in a way, we'll have to probably run a marketing campaign around this, advocacy campaign around this, so that people kind of are aware that something like this is available to them.
But I kind of want to come back to ask you, and we spoke about this also earlier, where it has been 7 years since this entire conversation has been happening, right? And ultimately, whether it's the WCC or the Hema Committee Report, at its core is about work. While it is about sexual harassment, it is about labor rights, it is about human rights, the conversation ultimately is about work, work opportunities, safe workspaces. For you as a woman working in the industry and in Malayalam film industry, what has it been like to be a working woman professional who now also is part of these conversations and is part of the same ecosystem? What's it been like for you? Has this identity sort of taken over who you are and have been? Tell me a little bit just about like the emotional experience of being a woman in the industry at this point.
Oh my God, you touched a nerve. So, you know, let me talk about my career trajectory, because at the point when I left the industry to study abroad and do my master's in public administration, I was about 27, and there were already these murmurs, you know, it's like I'm the top of the actor, like top of the charts. You know, I've won 3 to 4 film fairs, 2 state awards in each of the film industries that I worked with some of the best filmmakers, all of that. And it was like, I think it was some like a film set where this production manager, who was just a production manager at that point of time, like he was just starting out, now he's like a big producer, etc. And which is in a decade, right? I was just 27 and this guy comes up to me, he's like a production manager, like in the hierarchy, like really down there. And I'm like at the top of the hierarchy, like you're directly like the top actor. That's how it would work, right? Imagine like a business analyst going to a CEO and saying, hey, you're too old, you should get out.
And that's what he told you?
That's what he told me. He's like, it's 20, you're 27, you can get out. But interesting part of it, like look at this educated, smart, privileged woman and all that, right? Which is such a, like a scam sometimes. And, you know, they say that teachers can teach you, but like sometimes life teaches you more. And I believed it, because even when I came into the industry, I was already coming with a cushion of a job and General Electric and doing very well for myself and my bosses. I did my first 3 films when I was still with GE, because my bosses said, Jaki karo. It's like, where do you get like an actor who is doing like main lead roles and also working in an office setup? So they were very excited about that. And I had an artistic side to me. I'm a dancer. I'm a professional dancer. So I was a theatre actor. I'm continue to be a theatre actor. But like, so they were like, this is great, like do both, like why not?
Yeah.
And strangely, when this multimodal work was not very much in vogue, they allowed me to like work
You
from
were
away.
moonlighting.
Yeah, I was like moonlighting. So, but then I had to quit at some point. It was like cinema industry is really
Yeah.
random. Like dates
But this
come up.
comment from the production manager really took a toll on you.
It did, because
Yeah.
and then I started prepping immediately for my exit.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, I want to exit, like how Shah Rukh said, I want to
Hmm.
exit at the peak of
Peak
my
of my
career. And then I said, even if I want to come back, I can come back. Like look at Natalia Portman, like she does, and PhD in psychiatry and whatever, like psychology, I don't know what it was, right after she wins her Oscar, so I can do this. And I'm only going to learn more. I'm going to better myself as a person. I always come from a theatre background, so I always believe that you can't just, even then at the peak of my career, I would not do more than 4 or 5 films in a year.
Yeah.
Because I was like, no, I just wanted to experience the moment and the process, right? And I have no regrets about either of those, because those decisions, either on a hindsight, because it kind of grew me to be the person I am today.
Yeah.
But also on hindsight, many other actors were of my age group, like you take a Dulquer or Fahad, or all of those people have skyrocketed in their careers. What have I lost in the process is 10 years of brand equity. And now if I do want to come back, and there was nobody explaining me all this, right? Like I do not have a WCC to say, you do stop being foolish, be more present, do all of this. No, there was no sisterhood, or there was nobody who was like mentoring you to do anything. So it's not like a choice, it's a choice that you made out of insecurity of potentially being unemployable, than a choice you make out of, hey, I want to do this in my life. Of course, the choice that I made was, what is it that I like to do and how I can pursue it. And I had the wherewithal and mentorship to pursue that. And I have done well in that. It's not like I haven't done well in it. I enjoy it as well. But do I enjoy it as much as art making or creative arts? Absolutely not. I have been a dancer since the age of 3.
But did you entirely leave after
I
that?
did. And I'm not a media person at all. I completely invisibilized myself. I actually, when I did Yobinda Pustagam, which was in 2014, when it was releasing, I did it during my break, my first year, second year break. I came and shot it, and then went back and did an internship with Poverty Action Lab on a randomized evaluation study. So it was like, I was like juggling between Bangalore and Munnar.
But when WCC happened, where were you career-wise?
I had come back.
You'd come back.
I'd come back and I started working in Center for Policy Research at that point.
Not come back to acting.
No. But I mean, Chef happened to me. Chef was a Hindi film, which happened to me because the director knew of my work. It's not something which I chose to do. And I was also refusing to come back because I was like, what will I do? Because I've worked with some of the best. I have won the necessary awards. So also there was this question of, okay, if I do something, I want to like really push the needle, right? And in Malayalam also they write good female characters. In Tamil, which is seen the best body of my work, and I think probably I think one of the few female actors who has had the best body of work in Tamil in the last 10 years, apart from say Aishwarya. Very limited way Parvati. I mean, all my 8 films are in that way brilliant and still thought of as, as
iconic in many ways.
Iconic in that genre.
Yeah.
So for me, like, what do I do different? Like, there has to be some kind of motivation, because working in cinema is not a joke.
Yeah.
Like, putting yourself out there. I'm not a media person. I'm an introvert. I don't like to like hang around people. Fortunately, in the South, you don't have to do parties and all to like get work. Your work gets work.
But your involvement in the WCC, what do you think it's done work-wise?
So I didn't quite understand, because I wasn't like, say, Parvati or Rima. I'm talking about actors because they are my colleagues. And so I cannot really, I mean, I know about makeup artists also being affected by lack of work because of being in WCC. And there was an effort where we also kept it optional for people not to disclose that they're part of WCC, which is still there. And we say that we understand you don't want to go into the media and talk about it. It's fine. It's a few of us. Anyway, we have gone and because none of us knew that the repercussion of this would mean no work.
In fact, I knew of people within the industry who told me that they wanted to be part of WCC, but were then advised not to publicly come out and associate themselves to not lose work.
One is that, and the
Yeah.
second is that they would never take pro stands.
Yeah.
Forget about pro WCC stands. I'm
Hmm.
taking pro gender stands.
Hmm.
But today, all of those women and men are happily taking pro gender stands,
Hmm.
and also are benefiting from all the WCC work. So, and
Hmm.
we're fine with it. Like, we never did it because you will come and thank us. We did it because we thought that this was the right thing to do for us. But I think the invisibilization has happened multiple ways. So I really didn't understand when Parvati was saying that I'm being excluded, right? And when you say excluded, of course, she's had like films come up. But like, understand that in the industry, a lot of our male colleagues who are at the same level as us in terms of marketability or commercial appeal do not work with us or do not choose to work with us. It's a huge fight. And so it's that kind of invisibilization. Because we are considered antagonistic to the industries, into the direction where the industry technically wants to or wanted to go. And we've always been, which is why an IFFK will not thank a WCC for the fact that they have 51% representation of director strength. They will not, they'll take all the benefit of it. And we're fine. We just, our mission is achieved the minute we shut down WCC. The day WCC closes, we'll be the happiest people. But we are seen as those thorns who are not wanted. Okay, so that's one kind of invisibilization. Because if you choose to do their film, then you're basically saying, so even if you look at whatever Parvati has done, or Rima has done, or like I have done, or when I have chosen to do, so I started actively chose to start doing films in 2022. And there was a motive behind it. I mean, I wanted to grow what I could do as a storyteller. And I think I kind of, it took me so much of time to articulate that. And such a loss of time, right? Like, just see the amount of time that has been lost. But there's a second form of invisibilization, right? And that is that I realized when I went back on sets, and this happened even in 2019 when I did a film with Adur sir, a short film. And it had Mukesh in the lead. And these are people I worked for the last decade with. And suddenly I was having panic, and I love the camera. I'm like so obsessed, I can like take the camera and eat it. Like, I'm like, I love the camera that much. And the camera thankfully loves me. I like to believe that. But for me, it was very interesting that I was starting to have, I'm not a person who normally suffers from panic attacks. So I'm like fairly like, because I'm a very disciplined dancer or like whatever it is, there is a certain kind of equilibrium in the mind, right? And suddenly, and that too in front of the camera, which I love the most, I didn't understand why I was having panic attacks, why I was crying after the shot is over. Because at the end, however engrossed you're with your character, at the end, you have to go back to yourself, to the hotel room. And I was like, I'm not enjoying this process. So even when I did Tekkan Talakes, I was not enjoying the process. Even when I did Wonder Woman, which was a very safe space because it was Anjali's film, Parvati was there, Nitya was there, all of them are colleagues, right? And it was an all-female film, like technically for whatever you're standing, but it's not enjoying the process of being an actor. And I thought maybe I've either lost the mojo and the interest. But then I recently, like now, in June, and this is why I decided to go for the naturopathy treatment, is that I started doing a Bengali film with the director who made Pink. And I worked with him in 2 films before that. And it was a sing-sound Bengali language film. And suddenly when I started working there, I was feeling very free. So when I was doing the Bengali film is when I suddenly, because there's nobody seeing me as a WCC rep. They're only seeing me as an actor. And they're seeing me as an actor in a space which was very safe because they knew me as an actor and they also had therefore a certain amount of expectation. And then I had co-actors who never looked at me with any lens.
Right.
I had a kid, 6-year-old kid, and I had a husband and I had another co-female actor. And it was all like, listen, you're being competitive. You're like on the frame, you better be visible on the frame. And you have to just get your craft. There's nothing else. You were
transcending the identity of being a founding member.
And I could just be an actor. I was not carrying the weight of any identity. Other than my character. And I just enjoyed the damn gig. That's when I felt like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And that's why, I left it not because of who I was or what I could do, but potentially because the industry didn't have anything to offer. And when it did have something in parts and bits, I didn't quite enjoy it because of the weight of, like, for me to do a Malayalam film also means that I have to work with all of these people, and all of these people will have to keep aside that baggage as well.
Yeah.
And have to stop looking at me as somebody who represents a certain right and look at me as a character. Because honestly, if you look at my filmography, I've always done characters who never represent who I am. For me, it was always like, can I play a tribal warrior?
Yeah.
Like, I had nothing to do with tribal communities or being like, I never thought I could do action films. And I did it because it was interesting.
Yeah.
I in my very first film, when I was 21, I played a mother of 2 kids, which is rare and unseen. At least, like, now people like try to act very generous about it. But even like at 21, nobody would think of doing that as a debut film. So for me, this has been quite a revelation that the invisibilization, in a way, for us is both external and internal. That you carry the baggage externally on a set, where they see your performance. Even they come up with characters which are very, hey, listen, I want to change the gender landscape. And that a woman-centered story has to be about that for you, instead of it being like just a great character and a great story with a woman in the center of it.
Yeah.
And the internal burden that you carry, that everybody's looking at you like that. And the minute you dispel that, a part of it is also self.
Yeah.
That you kind of move outside of that. And for me, fortunately, the Bengali film experience has been great.
Yeah.
Because now I know exactly what I am responsible for versus vis-a-vis the world, and how much how much of that responsibility should happen.
That you haven't lost your mojo.
I have absolutely not lost my mojo. I still love the camera.
Yeah.
and I think the camera still loves me.
But thank you so much, Padmapriya, for coming in today on a Saturday and having this conversation with us.
After delaying it for an entire 3
months now.
3 months,
but
no?
Has it
Quarter,
been?
no?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've wanted to have this conversation. But this is a good time, I think, since the release, and a little bit of dust has settled, and then there's a lot more that needs to be done.
A lot more, yes.
And this conversation can go on because it's 7 years
and a lot of
work.
moving parts.
And a lot of moving parts, and hopefully we can have another conversation in 6 months to look back at this last 6 months since our conversation now. But once
and
again,
hopefully that's the winding day of WCC.
Yeah, that would be the dream,
that would
right?
be that a dream.
That would be the dream. Yeah.
Yes.
No, but thank you so much for coming in. I hope this year is filled with a lot of work for you. And a lot of good characters.
Thank you.
Yeah, and viewers, thank you so much for listening in. Please do go to the News Minute and News Laundry website, subscribe so that we can bring you in-depth long conversations like this.